Hello and welcome to Safe Space, the official Safe in Our World podcast. For those who don't know, the main goal of Safe in Our World is to create and foster worldwide mental health awareness within the video games industry. My name is Rosie, and today I am joined by Adam Clarke from Game If You Are. Welcome.
Yeah, hello. Thank you very much for having me. It's my first ever podcast, so hoping to make a good impression.
I know, I feel so honoured that it's your first podcast, and also sorry that it's me.
You say that like it's a bad thing, but I mean, like, at the same time, like, this is my, I say first podcast, you're saying honoured and all the rest of it. I'm a very new entrant into the games industry, like the whole space. So,
me too, don't worry, we're in this together.
Yeah, there you go. So no need to be worried about anything, really.
No, absolutely not. I do think it was funny that the first time I met you was at Twitch London, but we had a bit of an encounter before because you were volunteering for Safe in Our World for the Twitch London event, and I accidentally sent you the wrong address to meet up for the VIP event. And then I was at dinner and I switched on my I turned on Twitter and saw that you tweeted at me publicly, being like, someone needs to get Rosie to check her direct messages because I'm a lost Irishman in the middle of London. And when I tell you, I've never felt so guilty in my entire life.
No need to feel guilty. It's just one of those things, you know, just the way it happened. It was funny, but it did offer an interesting experience in that, yes, so for context, I work remotely in the UK industry. I'm actually over in Ireland in a tiny town called Carlow, which for like the best geographical indicator I can use is like southwest of Dublin, because most people know where Dublin is. But anyway, yeah, so I was very excited because our company is affiliated with Safe in Our World. I work for, as you say, Game If You Are. And as a result, like, I got chatting to yourself, Rosie, through that, and then I learned about this upcoming event. I was like, oh, brilliant, I can finally start doing something to kind of give back to the industry that, I've had such a passion for all my life and all the rest of it. I can start getting engaged. And socializing in a gaming aspect in Ireland is hard, particularly when, like, I suppose the average person like yourself, Rosie, like, lives in London, very metropolitan area. I live in the middle of nowhere in like the most remote location. So like my next door neighbor is like a cattle farmer. So that kind of gives you the idea of the company I'm at. And he's not exactly like, I can't exactly chat to him about Farming Simulator or anything like that. Surprisingly, very little interest.
He doesn't need a simulator. He does it for
exactly. He lives the farming. But anyway, yeah. So
simulator.
Exactly. There you go. So the event went off anyway, and I was so excited. So I said, oh yeah, I'm going to go out of my way to attend this. So booked me flights, this and that, and all the rest of it. So I had a real song and dance getting over, but it was all part of the experience. I was very excited. And then, of course, I land in, and I've got a little experience with London, but like, I come from a town with, I think, a population of like 10,000 or something, or a village even. So, and I say that, I live on the outskirts of that, so very small area where I'm from. So London, by comparison, just can be a bit overwhelming. Like, I've lived in cities before, but it's especially with COVID and all the rest of it, I've just been, I would say, probably a bit out of practice with it. But yeah, the way that showed up is I knew where to go for this event. I navigated the underground, went to where this event centre was, and the loveliest fellow was there, more than willing to help me. And I was there going, there's this Twitch event tonight, and he goes, no, that's tomorrow night. And immediately going into panic mode, I insisted to him that he was wrong about his job and his location, and that no, in fact, the Twitch event was here tonight, and got into a spirited debate with him, to the point I think he was starting to second guess himself. But eventually, and then that's when I started going on Twitter, going like, or he was like, no, look, I'm pretty sure you got the wrong place. Something going on tomorrow, that it might have been moved or something. Then I found myself in a cafe with the most patient man in the world. I was like, can I, like, he was like, what food do you want? Take a table, this and that. I said, I really just want a coffee. I'm just trying to get my bearings. He said, oh, no problem at all. Got me sorted. And yes, then I put out the public appeal on Twitter, which was a bit funny. But it was great because as a result of that, I met Kat, who I ended up working with that evening at the event. So I got an early introduction to her. So, call it providence, call it luck, whatever. But it ended up working out quite well. And it was a funny story. So
it was a funny story. And the thing is, just for extra context, I didn't know that it wasn't at this place until about half an hour before I was meant to be there.
That's very true. So again, yeah, just to clarify publicly on podcast again, I don't blame you at all. It's just
I blame me a little bit, but also like, yeah.
Look, I survived, and sure, look,
It
as I
all
said,
worked out in the end, and it was a lovely intro to Cat. So
exactly, yeah, and it was a fun event when we did kick off. Both the Friday and the Saturday, very enjoyable. So I was very glad to be a part of it.
yeah, I was going to ask you. So, like, how did you feel about going? Because that was probably one of my biggest events post COVID that I've been to.
Mm,
And I don't know how you felt, but obviously I was a little bit nervous about the whole thing, and it's always difficult kind of getting back into your comfort zone with events when there's lots of people
mm,
and stuff like that. And like myself, I'm prone to panic attacks, so I was like, "Whoa, is
mm.
it going to be one of those? Am I? Will it?" And so that was kind of going through my mind. But what about you? I mean, because you were traveling as well, which adds extra stress.
That's true. Yeah, and the traveling is definitely a bit of an impact. Where like I'm back. It was my first time. Well, no, sorry, not that's not entirely true. It was my second time on a plane since COVID. I had actually travelled briefly before that, and then I was back on the plane flying over. But probably the biggest thing that threw me off, A was learning that Stansted is much further away from London than I had initially anticipated.
Yeah, it's
But
quite a trip.
yeah, but there's trains, so I got to and back from the end, so it all worked out. But yeah, that was a lesson learned, and like, I was staying with family while I was in London, and I learned you can nearly see City Airport from my aunt's house. So I'm like, well, there you go. I'll go there in the future. but I digress. My biggest concern was actually that the UK has become a lot more like lax in its like sort of interactions with COVID and like around events and stuff compared to Ireland. Ireland is still very much like, and I think this may have changed in the UK since I've been there, but Ireland is very much when you're on public transport, if you're in any sort of space or anything like that, you have to keep the mask on. Now, of course, it's the exemptions. You're sitting at a table at a restaurant having a meal or whatever, because you're not going to get food through the physical mask. You can take it off. Then it's like, again, there is a bit of leeway. It's not like every movement you have to have a mask on, but
Mm.
still a lot sterner than what was being practiced in the UK. And probably the thing that really threw me off was when I was traveling around, I had a mask on at all times, but it was public transport that got me the hardest, because on public transport in Ireland, at all times, people have to wear a mask. And when I was flying over, I was wearing a mask. I was flying back, I was wearing a mask. And then I was on the underground and the bus, and I would say probably one in every like 7 or 8 people was wearing a mask. And
Yeah.
it was quite. I was kind of like caught off guard. It's become, as I say, it's become that new normal for me to go around and like actually be surprised by people not wearing masks rather than by people wearing masks. Is a bit of an interesting observation, I suppose. But
Yeah, it's
yeah,
almost
no,
a bit of a shock to the system, I imagine, as well. Like,
yeah, particularly when like I'm so used to masks and all the rest of it. I was admittedly a little uncomfortable. I was there going like, COVID could come back at any point, and this was before we knew about the Omicron variant. So
hmm.
hopefully that sort of just jostled a few people into wearing masks again. But I think it's since come back now that in the UK you have to wear masks on public transport. Just end of, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
I mean, London is always meant to be the case. It's just
Mm,
people don't always listen, which is very frustrating.
I can
Um,
imagine.
yeah. So to kind of kick this episode off a little bit, we always seem to ask our guests about their favorite games, both of all time and their current favorite games. So that is going to be my question to you,
Oh, it's
and I'm definitely going to judge you on your answers.
yeah, it's a tough one. Like to say favorite games of all time, and I mean it kind of asks the question, what is your favorite game? Is it something that like left a strong enough impact on you? Is it something you replay all the time? Like like I get, this is me pulling out a former career in politics, like dancing around the question. But if I were, I think to say my favorite game, or maybe even favorite series, I think I would have to say probably Mass Effect, and that's purely because it's the first game I've gotten like physically grafted onto my skin via tattoo. In the form of Legion is my favorite character, who is, for those who don't know, he like it's a space game, aliens, robots, all that kind of thing, but effectively he's a robot, and he raises the question: does like synthetic life, does it deserve autonomy? Do beings that are like man-made? Do they have souls themselves? And it's an interesting experience because I come from Ireland has a long history of like Christian tradition, and like we're in a modern Ireland, so we're actually becoming much more agnostic, atheist, that kind of thing. Like uh, religion has much less sway over Ireland than it did like in the past, and like politically, we've had huge overturns in what would be in just the last like 10 years. Like gay marriage has been legalized, like pro-choice legislation has been legalized in Ireland, all that kind of thing. All that to say, I realize I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, but all that to say that like question of spirituality, and he even has like the defining line, "Does this unit have a soul?" when he's referring to himself. Um, all that to say, like that's something that really hits me where I'm there, like, you start to wonder about like, is there anything at the end of life, or like does it just end there, and is it okay if it just ends there, and is it okay if there's something else after that? So it's just one of those quotes that kind of got me thinking, and it really struck a chord with me, so I got a tattoo. So all that long answer to say, Mass Effect's probably my favorite series of all time. But on top of that, like I've played a bunch of other games. I love Hollow Knight to bits. So I'll go back and I'll replay that. The
Mm-hmm.
XCOM series, while I am a save scummer to the end, massive fan of the XCOM series. The moment anything goes wrong, I reload because I make the fatal flaw of making all the soldiers people I know and care about, which you shouldn't do in a military game with permadeath. But I digress. And just recently now, I've gotten very into it. I've started playing Hades. I really like my roguelites and all the rest of it. I know Hades has been out for a couple of years. I'm only getting into it now. Just being the budget gamer that I am, I tend to only pick up things when they're on sale. But playing through Hades and absolutely loving it. Like I was expecting just sort of a roguelite, but it's a roguelite with a fantastic story, great characters, great combat, amazing design. Like the art in the game just blows me away every time.
It's
And
beautiful, isn't it? Like,
a
oh my gosh.
fantastic experience. So yeah,
Everything you've talked about has been like stuff that I have wanted to or have started playing. Like Mass Effect, I was I'm not going to say bullied into playing, but I was heavily coerced into playing, and I wanted to play
mm,
it. But my laptop just can't really handle games that much. And
mm.
so I am waiting to get a proper gaming PC or of the like to be able to play it properly. Um, and really go through it because I really liked what I played, but it was so frustrating when it like lags or like the computer is louder than the game sound and stuff. So
Oh yeah, when your computer sounds like it's about to boot off into the stratosphere,
oh yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I was just like I'm fearful for my ceiling right now if I keep playing this game because it's just going to go out of it. But that's one I always want to play, and I love the sort of narratives that really get you thinking as well. Like I was a huge
Mm,
philosophy person, like philosophy and ethics sort of discussions really, really intrigue me. And I like having my opinion changed and challenged quite a lot with that sort of thing because I used to be that person who was like, no, no, I totally believe this. And then I was introduced to all these different arguments and philosophical debates from like hundreds of years ago. And I was like, this is so
mm,
fascinating.
mm.
Um,
A lot of people think getting your mind changed is a bad thing, but I think the ability to change your mind based on new information it's a sign of character rather than like sticking your foot into the dirt and going, nope, that's the way it is, blah blah. Because that's how you get like dogma, and people just believing things are a set way, and that's the end of it. So I
yeah,
think it's
exactly.
it's it's actually a very good characteristic to be able to change your views based on new information, or even to consider several points of view, I suppose. But
Yeah,
that's
because you could still believe something, but empathize or understand or relate to someone else's point of view, even if it's totally different to yours. Because, like, I think I get that a lot with different religious debates and things like that as well. And I understand where they're
yeah,
coming from. It doesn't change my mind, but it's good to know what other people think and relate to, so you can be a more empathetic and
yeah.
good, decent human being, right?
Exactly. It doesn't take a lot of effort to not be a mean person. That's something I've learned. Empathy goes a long way. But then I suppose, they say there's different types of intelligence, and I've never been able to identify what type of intelligence I quite excel at because I feel kind of silly with everything, but I suppose we all feel that way. But
Mm.
I very much enjoy interacting with people, and I believe emotional intelligence is one type of intelligence. So if I were to identify any type of intelligence I'm good at, I would say that. So I might naturally just be sort of empathetic by nature. So I've got to understand that maybe other people aren't naturally as empathetic as me. But it's just one of those. It's one of those things, as we say.
It is. It is one of those
Mm.
things. But I agree. I think you're very, very much a people person. And it's very hard not to get along with you.
That's true. I used to live in Loughborough. Worked. I have a very interesting career history. Working several jobs I was underqualified for, but at one point I was an engineer after like a week's training. And a fella I met there and was briefly friends with. Time went on, and all the rest of he went off and got another job. But he was a massive Dungeons and Dragons head, and I hadn't experienced much of Dungeons and Dragons, and I learned about it through him. It was very good. But he said to me, he's like, "Yeah, God, you're a really relaxed person. You're very fun to talk to." He's like, and now this probably means more to Dungeons and Dragons fans. He's like, but it's like when if you were a character in Dungeons and Dragons, he's like, you'd have like a +2 to all charisma rolls, and I'm like, I'm going to assume +2 is good in that case.
I also don't play D&D, but it sounds like it's a good thing. +2 charisma anywhere is a great thing.
Exactly, you know. I don't know if it's the accent or just being a very personable person, or maybe a mix of both. I don't know. Definitely, I am. I'm often told the Irish accent gets people pretty far, and I've found very little cause to correct people.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie to you. That was a huge part in also wanting you to come on the podcast. Like, I think
No,
you're
yeah,
incredibly interesting, but the accent is just so nice to listen to.
I appreciate that. It's interesting that you mention it because, by Irish standards, I'm actually considered to have quite a light accent. Like if I speak to people in town, like in my hometown, if I go properly into like Carlow town, I'm considered to almost sound like English by comparison, which is not great to hear, given given in Ireland, of course, there's that whole history there and all the rest of it. But you know, people know at the end of the day that I'm Irish, but in certain contexts, like my accent will get stronger. Like if I'm around other Irish people, I suppose it becomes a bit more exaggerated then. I think that's a psychological thing that happens to anyone in their accent when they're speaking to other people with their accent.
Yes, absolutely. When I go home, my Yorkshire accent comes out a lot more, and it's always really interesting because then I come back to London and everyone's like, "Oh, you sound a bit more Yorkshire than you usually do." But no, I think I would say, have you seen Hot Fuzz?
I have. It's one of my all-time favorite
I was
movies.
going to say you're like the first translator for Hot Fuzz then.
Yeah, there you go. And that's probably a fairly accurate place to position myself, where like you can still pick up the accent, and like I have literally worked as that. I've had friends from England over to Ireland, and like I used to have this taxi driver, and like I have a Carlow accent, and this taxi driver has a Carlow accent. So, like I get in the taxi with my friend Danish, who was from Pakistan originally, but like speaks English fluently with like an American accent. I think he learned from an American teacher. But we get in the car, and I'm like, "Oh well, Jimmy, we're just heading out to the house there." And you turn around, "Oh well, and who's this now? How are you getting on?" Blah, blah. And my friend was just standing there and like, or sitting there rather, in stunned silence. And it was like Hot Fuzz. I turned around and said, "He's asking, what's your name? How are you getting on?" All that kind of thing. And I ended up sort of acting as the interpreter. You're mad, like the taxi driver could understand him fine, but I had to interpret what he was saying to him. So a fun experience. But yeah, I've accepted my lot in life as midway Irishman, I suppose.
I think that's a good place to be in. It's convenient.
Yeah,
Because I
especially
reckon you
since
could
I work
really
in
lay
the
it on
UK.
thick as well if you needed to.
Oh and again, my accent comes out a lot stronger when I'm speaking to other Irish people, I suppose. But yeah, when needs be, I can drop heavily into the accent. But thankfully, there's not too many needs for me to drop into a heavy accent, unless I guess I'm at an event or something with just other Irish people. But again, that just goes back to me relaxing. But yeah, no, you were very upfront about bringing me on like a lot because of my accent, and I'm totally okay with that. You know, it gains me certain advantages, and I'll just accept that for what it is.
No, all jokes aside, I think you've got a fascinating point of view from the games world, which we are going to talk about as well. Like we are going to get past the accent as well. But
Good to hear.
but no, I am just a sucker for Irish accents. They're just great.
No, it's pretty common. We're one of the more popular accents out there. And then to dwell on it lastly, like however nice an Irish accent is, if you go into Northern Ireland, the Northern Ireland accent, I believe, was voted like the world's sexiest accent. So my accent is nice. But then, you know, you go up north and you hear, "What are you doing there now?" For whatever reason, that just drives people mad. They go crazy for it. It's a lovely accent, and I have plenty of friends up in the north, so it's one I like hearing. But yeah, accents are fun.
They are fun. You're right. And I'm sorry for everyone else listening who has to go from your accent to mine because I don't think mine's quite as fun.
I know. I love a good English accent. It's very charming,
Oh,
and
it's
it
just
is.
very boring, isn't it?
I know. I think it's nice. Like no, I don't think there's any accent that is particularly boring. But then, like, I have a background in like giving speeches and like politics, and presenting. I did lecturing at one point, so I think voice is just something I'm interested in general. It's very rare that I hear an accent that I don't like, and even in England and Ireland is very much the same. It's something I like in England is how diverse the accent is. Like you'd be hearing an accent in like one part of London, and then you'll take like 2 train stops, and you'll hear like slight variations of that accent based just purely on the area you're in London, and that's
Yeah.
not even to get along with like the different areas that you're in, like outside of London. Say you go from like Loughborough to Leicestershire, to like, which I always called Loughborough, by the way, because that's how we pronounce that, and they laughed at me for the first like few weeks, but then yeah, eventually I learned to say Loughborough. But like even you go from Loughborough to Leicester or Leicestershire, no, it is Leicester City. Like the accent changes again, and it must just be a small country thing, but it's very interesting nonetheless. And like that kind of, you can trace that back, I'm sure, to like like where towns and villages first started and grew into cities and all the rest of it. And of course, since people are all living separately and not interacting as much, these dialects sort of evolved all on their own, and now people interact. Like I mean, even Ireland, like we have the English language, like we do speak Irish as well, but even in English, we don't speak. Technically, we don't speak English. We speak Hiberno English, which is just English, but like the way we speak some phrases and all the rest of it is actually informed by like how the Irish language is spoken. I can't, and as I say that, and as interesting as that sounds, I can't think of any examples.
I was just about to ask you for an example, because that is interesting.
But it's interesting to hear how it has like this is me going into my history degree, but even in like the early times of like America being settled, I'm sort of talking, I suppose, sort of early 1900s. I'm really so late American settled, but like in that big push where people all over the world were flocking to America, the sort of period where you had no black people, no Irish, that kind of thing. As a result of that, black people and Irish people actually sort of lived in the same communities and ghettos together. And if you've ever heard the phrase in like, I think Ebonics is the term, forgive me if that's not correct, but do you dig it? If you've ever heard that from like movies set in the 70s or 80s, do you dig it? Meaning like, do you understand what I'm saying? That is actually originates from that sort of English language mixing with the Irish language, because do you understand in Irish is an Duigan tú é. So an Duigan tú é became do you dig it through those two communities intermixing.
That's awesome.
And it's a little fun fact as well, because I meet a lot of American people like, oh, I'm Irish and this and that, and absolutely you probably are. Like we spread like rabbits as a result of I'm sorry, I'm just going pure history here. We spread like rabbits
really
as a result of emigrating from the famine. But what's more interesting is what a lot of Americans don't realize is that a lot of I would say black communities actually more commonly have Irish ancestry than actually many white people. Like, of course, a lot of people in general have Irish ancestry in some way over in America, because we had like 1 million people emigrate over at one point as a result of the Irish famine. But yeah, those numbers are actually a lot higher statistically, I believe, in black communities. Now, I don't quote me on that. I don't have a source to back that up, and like we're talking, so I can't exactly like I can't like cite a source, like copy and paste it in.
I mean, you don't have a source and a date on
I
you right
know.
now? Unbelievable.
I tell you, but yeah, just again, I learned history in college, so somewhat biased to be very interested by it. But anyway,
No,
we should
that's
probably
fascinating.
talk more about video games rather than me going into the history. It's language and like the origin of words and all that always captures my interest. And then if there's an Irish connection to it, all the better. We're very proud people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I find that super fascinating as well.
Oh, that's good.
And so, like, because you've done so many interesting things, and that's what I think also brought me on to ask you to be on the podcast, because you work within the games industry, but that's relatively recent. You've done history, you've done politics, and then you have your own personal motivations for getting into the games as well.
That's true. Yeah, my career path is a bit interesting. As I said, I've worked a bunch of different retail jobs. 1 or 2 have gone under while I've been there. I'd like to think that that's not related to me. Yeah,
well, one's a coincidence, two's a pattern, right?
Oh yeah. Well, in that case, we're looking at pattern. Oh dear. Yeah, I've worked in warehouses. I've worked retail. I've done politics, engineering, lecturing. Yeah, and like I'm 27. But it's more just like. It's less like, oh, I'm going to go off and do this and this. It's just more, it's always kind of been a case of this is where the work is. and I needed work. You know, I needed to pay rent and feed myself. So I've had a very diverse career as a result of that. I probably will touch a bit more into the politics because I used to work for an organisation called the Union of Students in Ireland, which the English equivalent, I believe, is the National Union of Students, NUS. And now we operate somewhat differently, where, as I understand it, I'm not sure how NUS operates completely, but generally, if you run a students' union in England, as I understand it, it's sort of a volunteer thing, whereas in Ireland, it's generally a paid position, as in you work it as a career. But I'll go into that for like later. That's a topic for further down the podcast, I suppose. But yeah, I don't know if you want to include this in the podcast as well or not. But technically, I also had a very brief career in crime, somewhat against my will. But that was just a funny story from a holiday where I ended up becoming friends with like a local gang, who again really liked the Irish accent, and I just hung out with them because I had no one else to hang out with.
So,
Maybe I shouldn't be.
Let's rewind a second. So,
Yeah,
you became
it's my
part of a crime gang.
well, it's my sort of like claim to it's my fun fact about yourself for the rest of my life. And I should preface this by saying I engaged in no criminal activity. I didn't do anything like that. I'm a honorary member of a Mexican street gang, where I lived very briefly in Los Angeles. I was over there on a work visa. Whole bunch of stuff about like going over for a relationship that didn't work out, yada yada. Head wasn't in the best space. Found a hostel, got set up, but couldn't find it. Asked a guy for directions, got on well with him. He invited me to a house party. Next thing I knew, I went into a house party and lots of very intimidating men with tattoos and loud music and several illicit substances and weapons. And me immediately going, well, in my head, going, well, you know, if you like freak out now, they'll probably like murder you or something, me not knowing that they were actually fairly chill guys. So I just played along and went, oh, this looks like blah blah blah. But I was like 20 and I didn't drink or anything, or at least I didn't drink in America because it was illegal. But again, I'd just been like dumped quite badly, and I was there like, oh, I want to make friends and, you know, socialize. And these guys, crime aside, were actually quite nice. And I became, so just like for the few months I was there, I became friends with this like local gang. And I guess, I don't know, maybe I had their protection or something. A guy tried to mug me once and he ran away when he heard my accent. I still don't understand what happened to that day. But anyway, weird encounter. But then when it came time to come home, they like said they'd make me an honorary member of the gang. For what good that is, I'm not sure if that's like documented anywhere.
I was going to say, like, if you go back, will they know who you are?
They'll see me and like it'll be like I never left, you know. But yeah, that's my claim to fame, is that I accidentally joined a gang and they were pretty nice guys and I didn't commit any crimes. I cannot stress that enough.
For legal reasons.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I did not see that coming. That's hilarious.
Yeah. So I like to work it into my like career path. Oh yeah, I was briefly involved in crime, and then that gets that story going.
Yeah, maybe don't put that one on your CV.
Yeah, no, I tend to avoid. Well, it's not really relevant to any of the roles I'm applying to these days, anyway. You know, muscle and like, you know, protection, and I'm trying to think of all these crime-based things that sound cool. But no, again, didn't do any of that. But no, you mentioned sort of my driving interest for getting into the gaming industry.
Yes.
And the big I suppose there's two key reasons for it. And key reason one is I think before I could walk, I was playing video games. Like my dad had a Sega Mega Drive. And even though I probably didn't know what I was playing or which ways, I'm pretty sure I was playing Judge Dredd, which like a 2-year-old shouldn't have been playing. Even though I didn't know which way was up, I was still like playing away the console and hitting buttons and having a great time. And then that evolved into me getting a PlayStation for Christmas and playing a bunch of different games on that and really properly falling in love with video games. And again, I need to stress, I live very remotely, so the only time I ever got to socialize was in school. So as a result of that, video games ended up kind of taking a very near and dear place in my heart, just because like it was very hard for me to talk to people otherwise, you know. And then at that, like video games started getting popular, and then all this for a very, very, very brief period, I'd get to go over to other kids' houses if they were stuck on video games, because they knew that like I was the guy who knew how to get past a hard level or beat this tricky boss or whatever. So like here and there, I had actual like bouts of popularity when it was convenient for people, so it was an interesting experience. But yeah, so as a result of that, like all through my life I played video games, and I was very passionate about them. But that also applied to my sisters, who are also big gamers to this day. But my older sister, Rebecca, she was born with a learning disability, which it's like she's the most lovely girl you'll ever meet. Of course, I'm her biggest fan. You'll learn very quickly. Most lovely girl you'll ever meet. It can take her a little while to kind of understand things, and you're explaining concepts to her. She can just be a little slow to take it up, so you just have to be patient. She goes to like a special center. She hangs out with other people with like learning disabilities or physical disabilities. It's this center called the Delta Center in our hometown in Carlow, which is like one of the best, I think, modern facilities for people with special needs. And it's so just by like pure chance it exists in our hometown. But it's this amazing center that does fantastic work. So I can never give them enough shout outs. But anyway, Becky is probably even a bigger gamer than I am. And you mentioned gaming on your laptop and it being difficult. I work from my PC at home that I built a few years back, and I would call it mid-range. My sister does a lot of gaming on her laptop, and she very recently got into Final Fantasy 14. And my parents don't really know too much about video games. They've always supported us, but they're like, oh, your eyes will go square and all those things you hear.
Yeah.
Exactly. One of the things they don't understand really is the sense of community that exists in just the world of video games when you play a game with people. Like I had a group of friends I used to play Left 4 Dead 2 with, never met any of them in real life, but for years and years I played with them and had some like great evenings just shooting zombies together and chatting about anything as we did it. And my sister's finally starting to explore that, and I always encourage her, whether it's this or Comic-Con or anything like that, I always strongly encourage her to go and like get involved in these communities and all the rest of it, because it gives her an opportunity to engage with people where they're not treating her different because she has a learning disability. And it gives her, like, her social skills have improved dramatically, and my parents always go, oh well, that's a result of the Delta Center, and it absolutely does play a part in that. But I think they don't realize just how much her social skills have improved by her being able to interact with people in a sort of non-judgmental environment where the focus isn't about anyone's disability. The focus is about sitting there and playing a game and everyone working together to take down a boss or to like find this rare item or whatever the case may be. And because that sense of community is so important to her, I've started like letting her use my PC, because she's the same problem as you, where she tries to play FF14 on this little laptop, and God love her, she's so dedicated to it. She loves every second of it, but it's like 3 frames a second or something. So I started giving her my personal, my office computer to play games. I say office computer, I work remotely, so it's just my normal computer. So she'll come into my room in the evenings now and play Final Fantasy and just like engage with that community, and she'll just have the best fun of her life. It always just makes me so happy. I'm her younger brother, but I'm also her carer, so she just like, I have a very unique relationship with her as a result, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yeah, so she means a lot to me. It always makes me very happy to see her happy. So she loved Final Fantasy growing up. She knows more about Pokemon than I think anyone in existence. Where, like, she'll come to me and she'll be like, do you remember, that Pokemon, Suba Gavajou or whatever, who has the 3 feet and 20 eyes and he can summon black holes that devour the earth or whatever? And I'm like, no. And like every Pokemon, every detail, every game, like you can just ask her anything, and like if she's an interest in something, she'll be able to tell you anything about it. Like she's telling me all about FF14 now, and I'm learning about like artificers, and I think there's new classes since this DLC came out called like Reaper, and I don't know, some sort of doctor that shoots people. I don't know. I unfortunately don't play FF14 myself. Big fan of the Final Fantasy series. Yeah, I'm just not much of an MMO guy. Ironically, I do a lot of my socializing, even though I talk about how difficult it's been in the past and all the rest. Since I've grown up and become an adult and, can kind of manage my affairs a bit better, my social life is a lot more in person these days.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so as a result, all that to say, I wanted to get into gaming largely due to personal interest. And, like, I went and I studied marketing so that I could specifically do marketing for video games because I don't know the first thing about code, but like I like talking about things, and marketing is, if nothing else, is talking about video games and why you like them and why they're so cool. So it's kind of why I went down that path. I'd love to get into writing as well, but that's I think that's a project for down the road. For now, I'm very interested in learning about marketing and sort of exploring that from like the business angle. But so there's that, and then as well as that, video games have done a lot for my sister as well, in terms of helping her to come out of her shell, to make new friends, and really just to like, I guess, elevate and become like a person I never expected her to be. And like it carries over in her day-to-day life as well, where she's able to socialize so much better. She's off and she's trying to achieve things. Like she got her LCA, which in Ireland I think it would be the equivalent of, it's what people in England, I know there's lots of like apprenticeship programs in England. It would be the equivalent of qualifying to be able to do those apprenticeship programs, which was a huge deal for her because it's so hard for someone with a learning disability to get to that level of education. So I think like, and again, she's so passionate about video games. Like they inform a lot of things she does, and like you'll even interact with her, and like sometimes some of the things she says, you know, like sometimes I feel like I'm talking to a character in a video game where she'll react in specific ways or like act like a character would. Now it always kind of makes me go, oh, that kind of thing. But like they're her world and she's my world. So as a result of that, I figured like the natural step was to go into the world of gaming. So and so I was applying for jobs left, right, and center once I finished my master's degree, and then Game of You are, to my shock, offered me an interview, and then to even further shock, offered me a position. So that's where I ended up, where I am now today, where I've been in the job about 6 months and I'm loving it. So yeah,
That's so nice. I love it when people talk about the kind of the power of video games. It's beyond just pure enjoyment and stuff, because obviously that's a huge part of why people play it, right? But when it has like real life impacts with people and you can see people literally growing because of it and gaining confidence and becoming someone more, you know what I mean?
exactly.
It's
Yeah.
it's
Oh,
amazing.
I'm right there with you. I mean, it's probably in spite of my parents that I like push that line so hard. It's like, again, love my parents. They just never grew up with video games. So like they'll be like, oh, I don't see the value in video games, and I'm there like trying to make the argument that, you know, video games are this whole new form of media. It ended up being like my undergrad thesis when I was doing English and history. I took like a historical review of video games and sort of said these are like the modern novel and they need to be treated as such, and looking at all these different ways they can become and like the smallest one person team can make them, or like 100 people studio can make the next big thing or whatever. It's just, you know, it's the modern art form. And I was explaining that to a bunch of people who like read Ulysses religiously and were like 70, so they were not super keen on my argument, but I still got like a first class honors on that thesis. So, you know, I think
amazing. Congrats.
some of it, thank you, some of it must have sunk through anyway. But so
I always try and explain it to people as if it's just a film that you're playing.
Yeah,
a lot of the time.
I've been trying to encourage my mum, or rather, at least I could try to bring her into the world of video games a little bit, because she knows it's our hobby and our passion, but she can sometimes switch off if you're talking about, oh yeah, this fighting game and, you know, you can unleash this combo or whatever. But my mum loves reading. And so, and she loves crime dramas specifically. I'll go in and she's always watching NCIS or any other crime drama. They've all jumped out of my head. CSI, although anything with a bunch of letters in it, really.
Oh yeah.
My mum eats it at Rizzoli and Isles. She loves Rizzoli and Isles, all that kind of thing. And so I had recently played Disco Elysium. Amazing game, fantastic writing, and just overall one of like the most like mind-boggling experiences. Like one of the few games that I'm like actually crying at points where I'm playing it. Like it has that heavy of an emotional impact. But in a nutshell, the story is about like a day in the life of this policeman. And now he's woken up with amnesia, and it's a big part of the game and all the rest of it. But functionally, the main thing you're trying to do in this game is solve a murder. And so I'm there like, oh, crime, murder, mystery. There's sort of an angle I can come and get my mum engaged with this kind of thing with. And so I would be like, we go walking our dogs in the morning, and I'd be like just telling her the story of Disco Elysium, and she actually got like very interested in it. She was looking for updates. Now I don't think she'll ever pick it up and play it for herself. I'd love it if she did. I think she really would enjoy it. But now, like, as I've gotten older, as you say, like I'm beginning to kind of find angles to kind of bring my parents more into my world, as it were. Still trying with my dad. Even like he's mad about football, does not like FIFA. I gave him a VR headset the other day because I got it from the company. I was testing it out and making sure everything worked, and he was very impressed by that. So maybe that's an angle I can approach. I don't know. I'm still playing around with it.
That's
But
the thing, like there's such a variety in games that everyone will have something that they're interested in, even if they don't know it yet. And like
yeah.
with some of my friends, who one of my best friends plays a lot of PS2 games and like old games for the nostalgia, I guess. And she has recently become very interested in games because I talk about them so much and I've told her the story, and she's actually become really invested because she's very heavily into a good narrative. She loves books, like that sort of thing. So when I'm telling her about stories, like I was telling her about The Last of Us, I've convinced her to buy a PlayStation so that she can play it herself because actually she would find it really interesting. And she's watched other people play story games like that, and that's what's drawn her in, which is what happened to me as well. Like I used to watch my brother play because I didn't think I had that much of an interest in it, and then when I watched him play, I felt like I was part of it and I wanted to know what happened next and all of this sort of stuff. And you get that kind of dopamine in a different way. And then the same thing with my parents. Like the one thing that kind of brought us together with games was the Wii. We had the Wii Fit. I don't know if you ever had the Wii Fit,
I think
but
I think the Wii Fit phase was something a lot of families went through because my mum and my dad got very into that for like a week. But I was there like, oh wow, they're taking an interest in games at all. This is incredible. But yeah, then like both of my parents are big into fitness, so I suppose it makes sense. So
my parents not so much, but they my dad loves Mario Kart, and he played with. We used to play with my German exchange student because it had the worldwide version. So me, my dad, and Jenny, my German exchange student, would just sit and play Mario Kart together, and it was actually really nice. And then he got like really into it and had to complete everything with like a gold standard little medal that came with it, or the trophy, and I think that's where it set in. And then he got really into like little golf games and stuff. And I think that came from like on his iPad. And I think that came from the Wii because Wii Sports and the golf on there. He honestly, he loved it. And like one of my memories from
Wii
that
Sports
is like,
was a revolutionary experience.
God, wasn't it? And like on the Wii Fit board, I remember there was like a balancing one where you were a bubble.
Yeah.
And God, I just remember it really well. My parents were so into it, and I miss that because that's a huge part because they were never interested in before. Like they didn't care about Animal Crossing on DS or whatever. Understandably, they had stuff to do. But
I have one point now you mentioned it. I'm like, I have a public forum. I have the opportunity to say this about something about Wii Fit specifically that like it's a burning discussion me and my sister have. We're like, God, this would have been way better. Just in Super Smash Brothers, when they announced Wii Fit Trainer, I was like, oh my God, you're missing such an opportunity here. Imagine if you'd had the Wii Fit board as that character. It could do all the same things. And like, it was so much more animated. Like, he was like on the screen saying, okay, let's go do this next. It would move around, it made noises. Way more interesting than some yoga instructor.
Right, exactly.
So, like, my die-hard argument is Wii Fit Trainer should have been the Wii Fit board.
Really should have. Like Wii Fit board combined with a VR headset. That's the new world of gaming.
Exactly.
I know they have like mocap and VR experiences like that, but I mean, it all started with the Wii Fit board, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I had to begin somewhere. I'd be like VR headsets now. I've been starting to dabble into the world of VR purely for like work reasons. But I put on a headset, and then like 5 minutes later, I bought Super Hot and Beat Saber, like personally, and fantastic games and all the rest. But even now, like I'm there, like that's amazing. And even now, like people are adding on to it. Like people have got like these like haptic vests they can wear to like feel impacts in the game, and like even like sort of these weird treadmill things where like you take a step and it kind of brings your foot back to the center. I'm not quite sure the science of those.
That, and you can like run in any direction, can't you?
Exactly. Like we're really living in the future. You look at stuff like that. It's really quite amazing. And it's funny to see like games as an innovator, both like artistically and then like technologically, from a business perspective as well. Like in the entertainment industry, I think games make more than double every other sector.
Yeah, it's huge. And I mean, even if you're not interested in games as much, like being able to put a VR headset on and have a treadmill that makes you run in any direction. That's so cool. Like
Yeah,
regardless of
exactly.
games, that's
Yeah.
amazing. It's fascinating.
Like people are looking at Ready Player One, the sort of almost apocalyptic future,
Yeah.
and going like, oh wow, like oh it's so sci-fi, so far in the future, and at least like of course we're not having entire worlds to explore in VR and all the rest. We don't have an Oasis quite yet, but like that technology you can nearly argue exists today. Maybe not quite as refined, but it's there. Like
It
the
is
bones
there.
of it are there, and it's very interesting. Very interesting to see because Ready Player One was written like a good while ago, as I recall.
Yeah.
I might be misremembering, but if VR was around, I would believe that it was in its very early stages. You know. Um,
I'm definitely not looking up when Ready Player One was
I
written.
feel like, as I say that now, because I know it's inspired by a lot of stuff from the 80s and 90s, but I feel like it might have been written in like 2013 or something, actually. So it might be more recent than I realized. But even still,
Oh, it's only
2013, like,
2011.
oh, even earlier. And like, so in the decade that it's been, look how much VR technology has changed. It's gone from this sort of like niche thing to like it's this big thing now. Like markets are predicting it's going to be the thing that takes off in the next, like in this coming decade. The VR technology is really going to hit its stride. Um, yeah, and like to loop back to the tangent before we went off on it, I think Nintendo had a big part to play in that with like the Wii and starting to explore like play through motion rather than play by input. You know,
Yes, because
so
it's almost like the is it Ring Fit now that they've got with
Ring Fit Adventure, I believe. Yeah.
yeah, and it's just like a different take on games, and I think it's what draws probably more parents into it because it's incorporating like physical movement with games as well. So it's not just like you're
Mm.
not just sat doing it.
That's it. Parents can understand physical movement. That being
Yeah.
said, I did try to. Sorry, I shouldn't say parents. People who play videos, because I know I have friends whose parents play games, and that's so weird to me. But anyway, like I'm happy for it. I'm like almost kind of jealous that I don't have that. But like I was there. I remember trying to play. Like there was an on rails. What was it called? Dark Side Chronicles, Resident Evil Dark Side Chronicles, on rails Resident Evil game. Clearly not the best in the series by any stretch of the imagination. The format is completely different. I enjoy it personally. Not a lot of people do, but that's just me. But I tried to play that with my dad, and I'm like, okay, so this controller, pretend it's a gun, and you're pointing it at the monsters, and you're shooting the monsters, and you can explain that to someone, and the average person might like take a second to try to figure it out, and like, okay, so the sensor bar, and I got a point like that, and shit. Okay, grand. And then I gave it to my dad, and like he's winging the remote all over the place, mashing the shoot. Like the sensor isn't even on the screen. He's just shooting like the corners, going, I don't get this. What's happening? I don't understand. So yeah, I think maybe fitness games might be the way to go with them. Stuff that isn't like so very high pressure and like a zombie's going to eat you. It's more like here's a hula hoop, or go for a run. My dad likes runnings.
Yes, it's like there's this app called Run Zombies or something, or no,
Zombies
Zombies
run.
Run,
Yeah,
Zombies Run, and that's
I used
so
to use that.
fun.
Yeah,
Yeah, I used to
I
use
love.
it as well, and it really did freak me out a little bit because I
Yeah,
was
if you were
running in
like,
like North Yorkshire, and so there was just fields, and sometimes people weren't around, and I genuinely would get really into it, and then be like, "Oh my god, there's really zombies after me! I need to get home right
yeah,
now."
like they had that feature where, like, if you weren't keeping up a certain pace, you'd start to hear like snarls and
Yes,
groans, like
and they'd get
coming into
louder.
your
It's
music.
so scary.
And yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah, I was the same. But like, I started running faster when those came in for sure.
yeah, so for those who don't know, Zombies Run is like a fitness app basically, but it tells a narrative about as you're in a zombie apocalypse, and the more you physically run, you go and collect like supplies, and you check in, and you progress the story as it goes. But it was really fun. I actually really enjoyed Zombies Run. I might re-download it and try and get back
Yeah,
into it.
it's. I remember I like bought the app initially, but with the passage of time and all the rest of it, it's turned into like a what you call it, like a subscription thing now, where you can
Yeah, I
sign
think
up and
it's
get
evolved
access to all
quite a
the
lot,
content.
hasn't it?
Yeah, so it's come a long way from when I first started using it. But yeah, I would heartily recommend it too. It's great if you're looking for a little extra sort of incentive to get into exercise, and I like that. Those sort of I've been getting more into them now, like mobile games, which I never really would have played in the past. But Becky got me to download Pokemon Go again, and I've been playing that. And I've actually gotten really into Pokemon Go again now. It's come a long way from when it first came out, and
Yeah.
like I've got a phone that can actually play it. So right, like So I have a phone that can play it without turning into like a thermonuclear device, and that I really appreciate. Like if I was ever dying of frost, I'd launch Pokemon Go on an old phone, and that'd keep me going. Um,
Yes.
but yeah, no, it's come a long way. There's so many more features now. They do like regular events and updates, and they're always introducing new Pokemon from like whatever region is the latest. I think the English kind of region, the one inspired by English. Sinnoh, is it called? I think it might be the latest region. I don't know. As you can tell, I'm not as into Pokemon as my sister. But yeah, so Pokemon Go has a lot of stuff coming in. And then, like, for a more relaxed walking experience, because Pokemon Go is based on distance, there's one based on steps for Pikmin. And I love Pikmin. I grew up playing Pikmin. Pikmin 2, I think I started with. I went back and played the first Pikmin. But I'm the kind of guy who, if a single Pikmin dies, I'm like, no, okay, that's it. We're resetting the day. They're all too adorable. I can't bear
Yep.
to lose any of these little guys. They're too cute. So yeah, I'd be playing like Pikmin 2 or whatever, and I saw that Pikmin was coming out for a mobile game, and Pokemon is all about, okay, now you've got this battle system and you can like compete in gyms and blah blah. Pikmin is just, hey, yeah, go for a walk, plant some flowers, grow some Pikmin, give them pollen to plant more flowers, and you'll make friends, and they can run off and get you little like gifts and stuff. Much
Sounds
more,
delightful.
yeah, it's much more like Pokemon Go is a game, whereas I would say Pikmin Bloom is like an advanced like meditation app almost.
Nice.
That still encourages a level of walking. It's by the same developer, but like their whole thing in promoting it was, this is nowhere near as like involved as Pokemon Go. This is something you can sort of launch, take a look at in the morning. It'll tell you how many steps you've done at the end of the day. It even allows for like journaling, so you can make little notes as to how your day was. It even lets you put in the emotion happy, sad, or neutral, or whatever.
Like that though. It's just kind of like a nice reason to check in with yourself, isn't it? And it's
Exactly, yeah. I've found it to be much more of a mindfulness app than a game, but also it's a mindfulness app with Pikmin in it, and I like Pikmin. So, that's how you sell mindfulness to a gamer.
Absolutely. I've got heavily into just like more puzzle-based mobile games at the moment. Just like there's a it's really sad. It's just like there's a bunch of test tubes and they've all got different colored liquids in, and you have to unmix them and they all sit on top of each other. And for some reason, it's not even that like good of a game. It's just really relaxing and soothing to do while I
Hmm.
do something else. So like I'm on the tube listening to music, I'll just try and untangle some colors.
I do that now when I'm traveling. I've gotten very big back into Tetris, which
Yes. Oh, I love Tetris.
and Tetris is an interesting one because you'll fire away at Tetris and you won't be thinking much of it. And then you'll like read this like scientific data by like this professor saying, "Oh, Tetris is really great for, if you're suffering with memory problems, play Tetris. If, you've been involved in a car accident and you're in shock, play Tetris." Like all
Yeah,
this,
there's some
it's all
research
about
about PTSD,
help.
isn't there?
Yeah, exactly. It's all about like Tetris is great for like giving your mind a task to do, and as a result, it helps your mind process things a lot more healthily. But I'm there like it's getting to the point, and the more I learned about Tetris, the more I'm like, oh, your wife left you. Oh, play Tetris. Oh, you've lost your foot. Play Tetris. You've won
It'll
the
fix
lotto. Play
everything.
Tetris. Just play Tetris. That's if I could give anyone any life advice from like a scientific basis, apparently play Tetris.
Yeah, I mean, what have you got to lose, really?
Exactly. Oh man.
Oh, amazing. So let's just end it on a different note.
Yeah.
We've been talking a lot about games that are wonderful and probably
Mm.
not so much related to mental health. But do you have any games that you have found good mental health representation in, or you feel have been really good thematically wise for mental health that you've played that you resonate with?
I suppose I can come at this for two angles. There's one insofar, a quick shout out. I suppose maybe my team would appreciate it. I'm actually making a game for the first time ever. I'm taking part in a very small game. I'm
Ooh.
taking part in a very small game jam, and I have no transferable skills into the world of actually making a game apart from writing. So we're writing a game that focuses on the sort of relationship between carer and like the person receiving care. Carey, I don't think is a word. But like sort of we're making a very small game that sort of examines the relationship between carer and caree. a lot of people assume that like it's a very one-way relationship, but like speaking as someone who's grown up with a sibling with special needs, it's very much a give and take relationship. Like Becky has given so much to my life while I've also like looked after her. Like it's people look at you and like, oh, you must be so brave. Oh, you're taking on a burden. I'm like, no, I'm not. You know, like sure I'm her carer, but at the end of the day, I'm her brother as well, you know, and we'll always have that relationship. And she's one of the most important people in my life. And I don't see it as me sacrificing anything
No.
to be like taking my, because in the future, like when God forbid, but when my parents go on and all the rest of it, I very much see myself as the person who'll be in her life looking after her. Like she doesn't need too much looking after, but at the end of the day, realistically, she at least someone needs someone in the house with her. So like that's where I see myself being, is always being there to support her.
Yeah.
But yeah, so sorry, I'm going off topic and getting emotional. But no,
No.
we're making a game that examines those relationships. Now it's only going to be a very tiny thing on itch.io, but I'm using that as a sort of area to explore a few different sort of care relationships and with people with different conditions. So like there's a character inspired by Becky. There's a couple of characters inspired by two of my friends who have Asperger's syndrome. So we're using them to kind of showcase how two people with the same condition can still be quite different. You know, sort of dispelling the whole Sheldon Cooper Big Bang Theory, which, you know, great show, funny character, but he's not a very accurate representation of Asperger's syndrome. But I digress. And then we have a character who is based off of a cousin of mine who is nonverbal and like doesn't like physical touch and all that kind of thing. And how you manage a relationship with someone who like will only communicate to you through like body language rather than by speaking. But yeah, so keep an eye out for that, I suppose. I don't know, but it'll only be a very small thing.
That's fascinating because not many games think about that sort of representation. So I'm very
Yeah.
interested to see when that comes out.
Oh, thank you. I'll send you a link to it. But again, that's where I'm kind of tweaking, going, maybe I do have a bit of a future here in like writing in games one day, because like the team I'm working with, all wonderful people. So shout out to the team Go Care Bears, as we named ourselves.
I love it.
Which I incorporate bear into myself. Like my name is Terry Bear here on the Discord and all the rest of it. Bear is my favorite animal. It sort of became my nickname in college. I love bears. But anyway, they're all these amazing, talented people who are like great programmers, amazing artists, and I'm just kind of there as a writer, and I'm putting these little scripts together, and they're there going, "Oh my god, that's fantastic! I would never have thought to do something like that." And I'm there like, oh wow, like I never really recognized, you know, what value I had to add from like a narrative perspective. I was like, writing is something for like big famous, you know, authors or whatever. But really, yeah, no, I think anyone can write.
I agree. Especially if you've got experience about the thing that you're writing about. Like there's nothing that can be more authentic than that.
That's true, and I think that's why, I guess maybe that's why I'm getting so many compliments, because it's coming from a very authentic place. But to actually answer your question with a proper answer, games that I think look at mental health and sort of the relationship there very well.
That definitely was a proper answer, because that's so fascinating, but yes.
What I would say as well there is, to go back on it, Disco Elysium, where I'm not sure if you've played it yourself. But
I really do want to, and it's been on my wish list for a while. I just haven't had the time to get around to it.
It is a fantastic game where your character, like, in their mind is literally broken up into different aspects. Like, you can be, there's 4 different sort of, like, say, strength or whatever, and then, like, subclasses based off of that. Like, you can be, I think, an emotional cop, an intelligent cop, like a fast cop or a strong cop. Effectively, those are the 4 kind of key areas, and they all break down into, like, if you're a strong cop, you're also very prideful, and, you know, you kind of want to fight everyone and show that you're the strongest person in the room. A little bit toxic, but I think that's kind of the point of what it's trying to illustrate. If you're a strong cop, you have a higher pain threshold, so like if someone shoots you, you can kind of keep standing up rather than falling down, if that happens in the narrative. Like if you're a fast cop, you'll notice things quicker. You've like good sense of hearing. You can see things, all that kind of thing. If you're an emotional cop, which is what I played as because it kind of resonated with me, you have a very high like level of empathy. And in talking to people, like you think emotional cop, oh, he's just going to cry at everything. No, emotional cop means when you're talking to people, you're able to pick up on things that other people wouldn't pick up on. Like if they like freeze at a certain word, or like they stumble over themselves, or like, you know, they have a habit. Like as an emotional cop, someone who has empathy, you can pick up on how they're feeling about things as they say, which informs your investigation, going, like, you're saying this, but you're clearly you don't feel so convinced about it. But that is a very interesting game about an insight into mental health, because you play as a character who has amnesia but still has all these problems from like a bad history that affects their mental health. Like, your character can't explain it, but it's later revealed you were like, you had a lover at some point, and you just don't remember the relationship that you had. But it's very clear that that relationship left a very heavy impact in its absence when it ended, and that like he still suffers even though he doesn't know who she is, what her name is, or anything. He still knows that he's suffering personally because of the loss of that relationship. And then at that as well, he's a recovering alcoholic, or I suppose I played him as a recovering alcoholic. You can have him drinking everything around him if you want to, but like, he's someone who suffers from addiction is probably a more accurate way to say that. And you can help him recover from addiction, or you can just engage with addiction, like, and get the perks that comes with it. But you're destroying a man's sort of body as a result in the short term. And then, like, I suppose what the value that purpose gives someone, like, moving forward and trying to solve this case. And then I suppose the value of friendship as well, because you have Kim Kitsuragi, who is the sort of, he's a detective from another precinct who's been like assigned to work with you on this case, and you falling apart and everything going horrible in your life and whatever. Kim is the polar opposite. He is very much, he's like if a cop was I said that sounds like I'm saying cops aren't people, but if the job description of police officer was a person, he is like, he's punctual, he shows up, he interrogates people, he's very by the book, he writes everything down in a notebook. But even at that, even though he's a completely different person, the value of the relationship between those two people is highlighted, and how, I suppose, again, you can become enemies. It's a very dynamic game, but like, I explored becoming a friend with him, and like, he becomes your best friend, even though you're two very different people. He can see that you're struggling in different areas mentally, and it's something expressed so beautifully in dialogue, where you can be like reading a note or something, and you can start breaking down, and it's just something like writing something as simple as Kim places a hand on your shoulder and says, "Okay, detective, look, come on, let's go do something else now," or whatever. So I suppose how it examines mental health, and just like such a human experience, the way it approaches it, and then just the effects, rather than just kind of hitting you on the head with it and going, "Oh, and his mental health is crap and this and that." It's such an organic experience of this one person's mental health, and then how his world around him factors into it. It's a fantastic experience. So again, I mean, it's hard to find people who don't like Disco Elysium when they play it, but I would heartily recommend playing Disco Elysium to anyone who is looking for a very strong story-driven experience, where I guess you can build a cop to how you want to build them. So lots of funny moments as well. It has its own universe, like its own phenomenon, all that kind of thing. Very interesting, and really, it's a game that definitely leaves an impact on you.
I love that. I love games that leave you with options to be able to kind of grow your character how you want to. Because that's the thing where I think people find most personal connection with them, is if you pick the choices that you would have picked and see how that plays out, and then you can go back and replay it again and see the opposite effects and things like that.
Yeah, so I've
Fascinating.
done a cop who like was very kind to everyone around him, wanted the best for like the working man, all that kind of thing, and like stayed away, like realized he was an addict and focused on recovery and built his relationship with his officer, and went out of his way to like solve this case and be the best cop he could be. And I'm there like, and now that I've done that, I should do just a complete opposite playthrough of this man just continuing to actively destroy his life, and like being a flat out racist, being like
God.
sexist, like again, like just become the most toxic man alive, and like down any substance you can get your hands on, and like, are we going to work on the case? What case?
Well, that's the thing. Like, I can never bring myself to play that character, because
It's so hard to do.
it's
I
so
know.
difficult. I feel so guilty when I play it, and then it's just like, even like the Walking Dead game, the Telltale game. If I pick
Oh,
the
brilliant
wrong
game.
option by accident, I feel
Reload.
terrible. I feel
Yeah.
awful. And like Undertale, there's an option to play the genocide route, which makes you
Yes, great
leaving.
example.
Yeah, you feel like a shell of a human being when you've done that, and I can't bring
Mm.
myself to do it. It's also incredibly difficult when you get to the end.
Oh
Um,
yeah, Sans I think is the hardest boss fight in the game. I've never done the genocide route. I've never even watched anyone do it. I've just
I've
heard
had to
bits.
watch someone else do it because it hurt my soul to try it myself.
Oh, I couldn't. Like, one thing
Oh,
I heard that breaks my heart about that is how it starts from like monsters encountering you to like it's implied to the gameplay that it turns from like monsters attacking you to you're attacking monsters, and like they're trying to evacuate the
Yeah.
world and get everyone away from you, and you're just like, Jesus,
Yeah,
that's
you become the monster.
terrifying.
It's a
Yeah,
lot.
exactly.
It's
Yeah.
especially if you play the route first, where you the pacifist route, or even like the neutral
Mm.
route, where you learn to love all of these characters and then you just
And then you're
destroy
just
them
killing
all.
them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
There's
terrible. I'm gonna have to put a spoiler alert in in this
oh
for
yeah.
Undertale, but my goodness, what a game.
Oh,
But anyway,
Undertale
I
is
could
a
talk about
piece of
this.
art.
I could
So
talk
could
about
I.
this
So we
literally
probably
all
should.
day. I love it. But let's wrap up for now. But oh my gosh, what a conversation. This has been a delight.
I was very glad to be a part of it. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope those listening have enjoyed us going off on like 10-minute tangents about Wii Fit and and things like that, because it's brilliant. So, Adam, where can people find you?
Well, given that I'm not going to see too many people coming out to like a remote Irish middle of nowhere with a lot of cows around. Generally, yeah, if you can see a lot of cows around, there's a good chance I'm somewhere nearby. But fucking yeah, where can you find me? It's a good question, I suppose. My Twitter is at Gaelgabear. Gaelga is the Irish word for Irish. That is spelled Gaeilge, then bear, like the animal, just because, again, I like bears, and Terry Bear was taken. So I became
Oh
Gaelgabear.
no.
So yeah, Gaelgabear on Twitter. Do I have any really other social channels? Yeah, so it's sometimes related to video games, so worth a look. But yeah, so at Gaelgabear. I guess you can put that in the description or something. I don't know.
Fabulous. Yes. No, absolutely
Yeah.
will. But you can get in touch with you at Game If You Are as well. So that's perfect. I will link that as well. But thanks so much for coming on. Um, and for those listening, if you're struggling, please know that you're not alone. There is a lot of support out there. And if you're looking for somewhere to start, please do visit our website at safeonourworld.org to find a list of global helplines and a bunch of information about feelings and symptoms in games and all of that good stuff. So thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Safe Space, and we will see you next time.